Yeah, well, I'd like to thank you for allowing me to speak on this. This is something I'm very passionate about. And my thanks to Dr. Erico for giving the class in this. Um, because without that, it just opened up a whole new world. And it actually kind of it made me wonder why he had never wrote a book on it. Because he had a book on the Revelation, it was more about the historical interpretation, but not about this, what he called the metaphysical interpretation. So there I am wondering why the book wasn't written. And then actually came out of a vision quest. And within 2 weeks, I was writing the book. I just couldn't help myself. So it's another kind of visionary experience. But one of the things I want to talk about first before I go into the revelation is the power of symbols. Symbols speak to a different part of the brain than words. And in our culture, we worship logic. We got this run-on sentence going on that we think explains everything. Um, Actually, the earliest Christians considered silence to be the voice of God. When they would pray and their mind would blank, that was God's voice. Um, I think the, the different aspects of the self are very well explained by Jesus when he talks about loving the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. The heart is like I think of as your emotions, your passion, how much you bring into this, or as my Native American teacher used to say, how bad do you want it? The soul is from the Aramaic word is really the subconscious mind, and that how do you worship God with your subconscious? Well, the subconscious, where dreams come from, is all about feelings and imagery, and that is where the revelation is speaking. It's speaking in imagery. Mind is logic. That's what we do in our culture. And strength, I think of as your physical self. Now that you've got the message, what are you physically going to do about it? And this idea that the revelation is actually a picture of the inner self, what's going on in you, is actually something that is in line with the way Jews would interpret scripture. They had four different ways of interpreting scripture. There was the simple meaning of the words, exactly what the words say. There was a deeper spiritual meaning. And then there was something called midrash, which literally means search. And with midrash, you could connect scriptures to other scriptures, but you could also look at the scripture as happening to you yourself. So, and the fourth method is something we really don't use in our culture, which is numerology, because their letters were also numbers. So a word could have a certain number value that corresponded with another word with the same number value, and they made all kinds of connections that way. But this idea of midrash is a bit deeper than just scripture. These are people that did, and you see it all throughout the Bible, fasting in the wilderness. And they go on these long fasts and things happen after that. 40 days on the mountain and Moses has the law of, the law of Moses. Jesus, 40 days in the wilderness, and then he starts his ministry. These are very visionary people. The Bedouins were interesting to study because they never stopped doing these things. They're practicing a lot of ancient Middle Eastern customs still unchanged. They will still, if they are at some point in their life where they can't figure something out, they will go off up to a mountaintop or a mosque or some holy place, and they will sit there for as many days as it takes to figure it out and get an answer from God. I've experienced this in a form in a Native American training called the Vision Quest. And Vision Quest is fasting in the wilderness. They give us water, but no food. We're sitting there, one little spot in nature for 4 days. And there are certain things that no matter who you are, no matter what culture, no matter what era of history, the brain is going to go through when you're isolated like that and praying. And some of these things are what the Bible calls similitudes, where you're praying, your mind goes blank, and your eyes alight on something, and your mind starts interpreting that object like it's a dream you're having. So we have Jeremiah. God asked Jeremiah, "What do you see?" "I see the rod of an almond tree." "Well, have you seen?" for I'll hasten my word to perform it. Almond was a symbol of suddenness in the Middle East because it flowered all at once. So how is God speaking to Jeremiah? Through a stick. But we know anything you look at, God is the infinite universe all around you. Everything you're looking at is basically the face of God. And it will speak when you're in that mindset, when you've asked for it to speak and you know how to listen. So that happened to me in a vision quest, where my first vision quest, or I got fascinated with this ant that I was looking at. And I got so fascinated with it, I went home and I got myself an ant farm and I watched them. And they create whole civilizations that you can watch through this clear glass. They have a hospital room where they feed ants till they get better or die. They have, ants that control the work of other ants. And I finally realized that this whole civilization was based on ants that, digging this way, making new tunnels, filling in old ones. And each ant was just carrying one little grain of sand at a time, running back and forth. And I realized that I could do anything a little piece at a time. And that was my vision for my first vision quest. And that's actually how I wrote the book. You write books a little bit at a time. You don't write it all one night. So this is the kind of visionary culture this thing comes from. And the idea of this book here that I wrote is the whole idea that, Dr. Errico taught to us, the metaphysical meaning. All of this is happening inside you. So this is all the beasts and the dragons. These are all aspects of yourself that are going to fade away as you get closer and closer to God, that city of God. And some of the things that for me were really stood out as extremely important in the seals were the 4 horsemen. The first horseman is a white horse with a bow and a crown, and he goes forth to conquer. Now, this book was written, and a lot of it is about what the Christians were going through in the Roman times. So a lot of the book is about the polar opposites of love versus domination and control. And this is something you'll also see in yourself at times. How often do we want to control something instead of love it? That guy over there, he's an idiot. Look at him. This is all his judgment and stuff. It comes up, and it gave me the idea reading the book this way that my life is this apocalyptic battle between love versus everything else. And I have to keep reverting back to love. And it goes back and forth. And the other horses after the first one are just like the actions of conquest, because the white horse is this idea of conquest. Like a battle, a war doesn't happen when it doesn't start when troops cross a border into another country. It starts in the mind of some leader that wants to go to war. So if you don't catch it at that stage, next year you're in some kind of an argument or something like that. But the other horseman, and then the last horseman, is just the totally disastrous consequences of when you followed this conquest and control to its end. One of the main symbols in the Revelation is the Lamb. The Lamb, and you can see the picture on the cover of my book. I got a little lamb there. The Lamb is introduced as the Lion of the tribe of Judah. And you think of what a lion is. This massive animal with the teeth and the claws and the killing large animals and chewing them up. And you look and it's just a lamb standing there. This is just about the most unpowerful animal you could imagine physically, but it's a symbol of that inner love we ought to have. Love can be very passive. It just loves. It doesn't dominate. It doesn't control. It's very much like that lamb. And this lamb has 7 eyes and 7 horns, which is a symbol of total spiritual sight, perfect seeing of things. and total spiritual power, which is, again, just what love is. It's perfect. If that's all you have, it's a very perfect thing. But this image also has a part to it that is something that Christians can't handle, I found out. It's a lamb as it was slain. How did they slay a lamb? They slit its throat. So this lamb is standing there with its throat cut, basically. And I tried to get that on the cover of my book, and they wouldn't do it. So I said, but it's in the Revelation. It's right. No, no, no. We'll put it on the inside of the book, but you can't put that on the cover of a book. So it's just it's a kind of an example of a symbol that's too powerful, really, to put on paper. Other things about that symbol is I tried to make an image of the lamb with 7 eyes and 7 horns, and I can imagine it in my mind as a beautiful, powerful image. And as soon as it hit paper, it looked anywhere from odd to creepy to demonic. You just can't put 7 eyes on the lamb when it hits paper, and it just looks weird. So, in fact, and this lamb is it's just absolute love. And throughout the whole book of the Revelation, this is the entity that's winning over all these big demonic and destructive things. And really, it doesn't win by fighting, although that's how it's described. It wins by just being love. I mean, absolute love like that just exposes everything else for what it is. And in the 6th seal, we have all these people hiding in caves from the Lamb, like it's some massive destructive force. And when I looked at that from the point of view of what's inside me, there are times when I try to avoid love. I just want to be angry at someone. It's like I found a cave to hide in from the Lamb. So who do you want to judge? Who do you want to be mad at? These are the caves we hide in. And a lot of this, the whole, I mean, you see this in other parts of the Bible, but it is at its extreme in the Revelation, where God is described as a king. And a lot of what goes, the Middle Eastern kings had certain ways of doing things. So God is now in this whole idea of pageantry from a Middle Eastern king's throne room. For instance, when it says no one can see God's face and live, that's from a Middle Eastern king's throne room. When a commoner presented himself before the king, he was on his hands and feet, his knees and on his hands on the ground with his forehead on the ground, like the way the Muslims pray. To look at the king's face once was an immediate death sentence. It's very disrespectful. But then there's the phrase to see God's face. In the king's throne room, his advisors, like the king was on a big throne in the middle, and there was 3 advisors on either side, totaling 7. They could look at his face. So what these sayings are about is, on the one hand, no one can see God's face and live. It's about humbling yourself before God, and you will see God's face. It's about a certain level of wisdom that requires less humility before God. That's what these things are talking about. But in the Revelation, we have one of the most exceptionally complex examples of pageantry from a Middle Eastern king's throne room. For instance, the beasts that are before God's throne. Middle Eastern king's throne room had animals chained there to symbolize its power. Lions and eagles. Eagle would symbolize how big his kingdom is. And so it's really interesting to study just from that point of view. And all of this, as the Lamb, this total love just keeps dissolving all these different kinds of negative things. We end up at the end with the city of God. And the city of God they measure it, and it's 12,000 furlongs on the side. It's a large cube. That's 1,500 miles tall and wide. which is a massive kind of example of just how big this spirit of love is. It's also historians say that 1,500 mile base of it is about the size of the Roman Empire. So they may have been looking at getting enough people into this loving state so that they would shift the whole Roman Empire and heal it, you know? And the idea of this city, it's described as having the foundations of the apostles and everything. And Paul talks about it too. It says, and you are built on the foundation of the apostles and prophets, and Jesus Christ himself being the cornerstone of the building. And through him, the whole building is fashioned and grows into a holy temple through the help of the Lord. You're also builded by him for a habitation of God through the Spirit. And it's that same building, that city of God. And you read the description of it. And one of my favorite parts of it that I can never get over really is, and God shall wipe all tears from their eyes. And it's just an amazing description. There's a water that comes from it and it flows out of this. And water is symbolic of teaching. This is pure water, you know. Muddy water is more corrupt to teaching, but this is a pure water. And if you have this, when you have that love, when you're in that loving state, that is just about the most pure teaching you can have. Like when Jesus talks about the rivers of living water flowing from you. He who loves is born of God. He who does not love does not know God, really. And it's really the whole thing in the Revelation from beginning to end for me is all about love. And it's kind of interesting because reading it when I was younger, before I took those classes, Dr. Errico, it didn't seem like love at all. It seemed like this massive battle with all kinds of monstrosities and demons. Eventually, God wins by just, beating people up better. It didn't seem like love at all. But, with this interpretation, it's just a massively different thing. And I kind of wondered, did the earliest Christians actually believe this? What examples do we have of the earliest Christians doing it? And there's this something called the Odes of Solomon. It's the earliest Christian prayer book or hymnal. It's dated from 100 to 300 AD, and it reads like a cross between the Psalms and the Revelation. Many of the Revelation's images are mentioned as happening to the self, as in the following. He that overthrew by my hands the dragon with 7 heads, and thou hast set me over his roots that I might destroy his seed. Ode 22:5. So, and you definitely, you could pick up the Odes of Solomon. You can actually get it free online. It's a really interesting read. And it's coming from some of the earliest Christians, So that's the essence of it. That's some of the biggest highlights from this book for me.